First book of Kings, chapters 4 to 8 today, and this is a fairly boring section, I suppose, in the sense it's quite long and it's very descriptive, not quite to the extent of Leviticus or anything that terrible, but we do have a lot of descriptive language going on and all the rest of it. But the first part of that is some officials that Solomon appoints to sort of like government departments, and one of them is the Department of Forced Labour. And I don't want to make light of slavery and all the rest of it, but something vaguely and darkly amusing about having a department for forced labour. Don't know. We also have 12 governors who are appointed, one of whom is called Ben-Hur, but apparently this is a different Ben-Hur to the Ben-Hur in the Charlton Heston movie. Not quite sure on that either. The story kind of misses a trick here. I mean, if it was purely a story for entertainment, then you'd be sort of leaving people on the edge of their seat thinking, is this what's going to go wrong and all the rest of it? But actually, straight up, very early on, it's saying that this is actually a great time and it's all peaceful and it's for Solomon's reign is great. So it's sort of not ruined the surprise, because obviously it's nice to have something that's not terrible going on for a change. But it's straight up there anyway, so it seems... I don't know if that's just luck of the draw that Solomon's got a quiet time, or if it's better it's because he's so wise or something. But he does seem to be a righteous king at least, but nothing magic, so we'll have to carry on and see what that's all about. It does note, however, that Solomon is so wise that people come from all over the place just to hear him talk about things. And interesting, it also notes that he does seem to know lots of factual things. So with his wisdom superpower, it's almost like he's in the Matrix and had Kung Fu downloaded, so suddenly he can talk about trees and flowers and all the rest of it, which is interesting. So where did that knowledge come from? Don't know. But there we go, I guess it's another biblical superpower to some extent. On the downside, it turns out pretty quickly that Solomon does actually make his manager of forced labour department get on with it, conscripts 30,000 men to go and build a temple for God. I think the wisdom part seems to come in the fact that he makes them work for a month and then they get 2 months off and then they go back. So we're not talking sort of the Vladimir Putin sort of type of conscription. It does seem to be a bit softer than that, but it is still a forced labour department thing, so we'll have to see. It notes at this point as well, actually, I quite like it when we get dates, that it says this is 480 years that the temple starts being built after the Israelites left Egypt. The problem, of course, is we don't know when the Israelites left Egypt, but and there seems to be two schools of thought roughly, that it was either around about 1200 BC or 1400 BC. So it's quite different, so it doesn't massively help. But either way, we know we are definitely within the last 1,000 years of the BC era. There's a very long and boring detailed description of how the temple was built. It's similar to how the tabernacle was put together, but not as long. And God says to Solomon that get this all right, obey his commandments, be excellent to each other and all that old stuff. And God will come and live among the Israelites. It notes that it takes 7 years, obviously, to build the temple. And it was only at this point it occurred to me that this, of course, is the temple that David was going to build when he was lying in his palace thinking, it seems daft that he's in a big palace and God's Ark of the Covenant is just in a tent, so we'll build him a temple. David didn't get around to that, of course, because Absalom then tried to overthrow him and it all went crazy. So this is now Solomon actually building that temple that David had intended to build. But it's an interesting idea that God's going to come and live among the Israelites. And is that a good thing? I mean, it's not necessarily obvious, is it? I don't know. We'll have to see. Once this temple is built, Solomon decides he's going to build another palace. I forgot to mention, I think, that this is in Lebanon, actually. So we're not in Jerusalem anymore. Not quite clear why. But it takes 13 years to build this palace for Solomon, which left me thinking, well, hang on, how come it takes 7 years to build one for God and it takes 13 years? That's nearly twice as good. But it does note that the temple has a lot of gold in it, awful lot of gold. The architect of Trump Tower would have been delighted with that, I would have thought. And the palace is built largely with bronze, so there's clearly some sort of hierarchical thing in that respect, at least, I guess. The Ark of the Covenant is then brought up from Jerusalem to the gold temple, not entirely made out of gold, just lots of gold stuff in it, goes into the new Holy of Holies, and then it says the room fills up with a cloud, which is supposedly the glory of God. Fortunately, it's the cloud version of the glory of God, not the fire version of the glory of God, so fingers crossed no one's going to get Nadab and Abihu'd. But yeah, interestingly, God moves into the Holy of Holies in the form of a cloud. We then have a big long prayer of dedication from Solomon, basically asking God to forgive anyone who comes to the temple to pray for forgiveness. He also notes in this prayer that God knows what is in every human's heart, which is interesting. Also makes the point that he would like God to embrace everyone, or everyone to know God, which is nice. I think we have kind of dealt with the idea that it's Israelites or you're the baddie sort of thing. I think that's generally been put to bed now. And it also notes that there is no one who does not sin, which is, well, so it's obvious, but also interesting. So in the short version of that story, Solomon builds himself a big house and a church. And that's pretty much it. In terms of the interesting points to come out of that, I don't quite get why Solomon is having such an easy time of it. It notes there's peace all around. And is that just fluke, or is he doing something better than David? Is he a better person than David? Because the trouble is, back at this time, every time something goes wrong, it's ascribed to being an action of God because someone's done something. So it does suggest if everything's going well, it's because Solomon is being good or something. Don't know. It just seems to have a slight mismatch in tone with previous bits or something like that, maybe. And the other interesting point is this mention of that God knows what's in everyone's hearts and that no one doesn't sin, which are both, of course, sort of obvious concepts, I suppose, but it's interesting to have them actually stated like that. I'm finding quite often that it's difficult to separate what I think I know about what's in the Bible and what is actually in the Bible as well. So I think this is the first mention that God knows what's in everybody's hearts. I mean, we've had God looks at what's in the heart rather than at the external thing when they were talking about Saul. But to actually say that God literally knows what's in the heart of every single human being, I believe this is the first instance of that. And there's something sort of almost therapeutic, isn't there, about being told that, yes, it's not possible for a human to not sin. So there's going to be some sin. Albeit there's all this talk of forgiveness if you come to the new tabernacle temple thing to pray. But as we've already established, even if you're forgiven, there does seem to have to be a consequence. So, yeah, tricky. Anyway, we will move on and see what's next. Given everything is supposed to be going swimmingly and seems to be going well at this point, I presume it's all going to go wrong at some stage. I don't know, but onwards we will go and find out.